Right, so we've got the Raijintek Metis Plus, I think it's called. Went for this case because it's quite small, ideally sized for a mini ITX build. Don't see the point in going mini ITX unless you're going to get a small case. Right, so what's inside? Let's have a look. Top off. The bottom. I think the black one looks quite good in comparison to some of the colours. Basically, most of it's an aluminium case. It actually looks quite nice, this black one. Yeah, so we've got a fan in the back, little window that's been covered up, a vent in the top, the USB 3 sockets by looking at it, earphones and microphone socket, single power button on the front, and it looks like the power supply actually goes in the bottom, or at the front at the bottom here. Right, let's open it up and have a quick look. The screws are actually quite small, so you've got to make sure you use the right screwdriver so you don't round the heads off. They're quite tight actually. You don't want to lose these, they're absolutely tiny. I think the front panel looks quite nice, it's quite thick. The side panels are quite thin, the rest of it looks a bit thin. And I think the back panel is probably steel, but the rest of it looks like aluminium. Just remove this. So it's been anodised both sides. Got like a nice brushed finish on it. That side's just standard. This side's got the brush finish on. Have a quick look at it out. We've got the fan. The airflow is a bit strange on this case actually, the way it works. This fan's set up to exhaust, take the air out at the back. The problem is the power supply is going to sit in the front, and the fan on the power supply is going to go in this direction, and the fan on the back is going in this direction. It's one of the reasons why I'm using a standard AMD cooler. I normally would have put like a Hyper 212 cooler on this sort of arrangement. The problem with the Hyper 212, you need to point it either in this direction or in this direction depending on where you want the air to go. I don't think it's ideal for this particular case. So I've chosen to go with the downward firing CPU cooler, the standard one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this fan off, the back fan, and reverse the direction of the airflow. So I'm going to pull air in this way, so it feeds the downward firing fan, and also the PSU cooler will take the air out and underneath the case. I think that's going to be the best way. Yep, let's have a quick look at the back. So I think this is standard steel. It's quite thin actually in places. Yeah. It's a bit thin. But again, it's not bad for this sort of money. These are around £50. So it's not bad for this sort of money. And we're going to do a build in this case. I've already built the motherboard up with CPU hard drive and RAM is already installed. I'm going to put that into this case. It's going to be quite a challenging build to try and get to all the screws and things. There's different ways of approaching this. This particular case, there's actually screws all the way around it, so you can take all the panels off and build the bottom panel, which will allow you to get to all the sockets and things on the motherboard, but it can be a bit time consuming. So I'm going to try to take the minimum off the case and build it that way around, but obviously I'm going to struggle to get to some of the screws on the motherboard, especially this back one here. That one's going to be quite challenging, and the one down there may be quite challenging as well to get to. This one's probably going to be worse actually, but we'll see when we come to build it. Right, so we've got some parts that come with it. This is obviously the extension cable for the power supply. I need to watch when the power supply goes in here, because I've got a back plate on the power supply and I might struggle to get this cable in. I might need to modify it slightly. Right, so we've got some cables in here. Let's have a quick look what's on it. Let's try and get to that. Right, looks like you've got a speaker, the motherboard speaker. So you've got a bag of screws, some drives, probably a power supply, motherboard, and there's a speaker in there as well. We've got a front panel, HD audio, your front panel motherboard connectors. So you've got a power connector, power LED, which will be done through the same button on the front, and the hard drive LED through the same button on the front. So there's no reset button on this, so you just have to hold the power supply, the power button in to restart it. And then we've got USB 3 with actually a USB 2 adapter or USB adapter as well, so you can either plug in that one or that one. If your motherboard hasn't got USB 3, you can use this one. That's pretty much it. It looks like there's a button on there. I'm not sure if that's to turn the lights on and off for the fan or not. We'll go into that in a bit. Right, so I think the best thing to do with this Raijintek case to get the motherboard in is to actually take the bottom of the case off first. The reason why is, on the motherboard there's a screw hole at this location, and this one goes into here. With the underside of the case on, it's almost next to impossible to get that screw in. So it's a lot easier taking the back off the case. And also you've got the CPU power to plug in. And again, it's a lot easier if it's done like so. Just line up the back. Yeah. Line the holes up. That's it. So I just need screwing in, but now I can get to this screw at that location. Right, I had a bit of a problem with the graphics card seating correctly in the PCI Express slot. It seems to go in okay at this end, but at this end it won't go in very well. And what I found out is it's actually some cutouts. Some cutouts just here, and they're a little bit on the thin side. They need opening out a fraction this way, making a fraction bigger. There's one here and one here. So basically the metal here wants pulling out a fraction here and a fraction here, likewise this end and this end. It's quite difficult here with the motherboard in the way, but it's just about doable. And then when you try and push the card in, it will sit nicely. Right, the conclusions to this Raijintek case. You know, I think some of the things need to be adjusted a little bit. And I think, you know, with a bit of redesigning, I think this could be a really, really good case. Whenever I've used a case before, you know, would I build in it again? I think that's the key thing to whether you know, it's a good case or not. I've actually built in this case quite a few times now, and I've come across a few little problems, you know, all the time. So the first one is the GPU seating. You know, Raijintek really must sort this out. Where the graphics card goes into the case, the slots need to be wider and also a bit deeper. Where the blanking plates come out, they're thinner and less wide, so they go in easy, but that's not how graphics cards are. So that's a key thing, and because of that, I don't think I'd be buying another one of these cases. Right, so you know how to improve this case. Number one, sort the GPU seating out. Number two, I'd thicken the motherboard panel, the steel motherboard panel, and the back panel. The back panel is quite thin, it's got some give in it, which from a design point of view is good. However, I think it wants thickening up a fraction. I'd thicken the back panel up, make it twice as thick, and the motherboard panel twice as thick. You shouldn't really be relying on the motherboard to stiffen that back panel. It should be the other way around. Right, so I think I would change the USB cable, the USB 3 cable, and I wouldn't have the USB 1 on as well, so it's just USB 3 only. I think it's tidier for the cables, less chance of catching or anything. I'd put 2 off case fans in it, so a thin one at the top and a proper 4-pin one at the back. So 2 proper 4-pin fans. I think with all these changes I'm suggesting, I think this case, you could sell it around the £90 mark, and I think it would still sell incredibly well with some of these little fixes. The power supply, I'd make this case so it was only for an SFX power supply. The standard ATX power supplies come with leads that are too long anyway, so why not just make it bespoke for an SFX power supply? It would make a hell of a difference to the size of the case. You can shorten it, so I would shorten the case from the front to the back by about 30mm to account for the SFX power supply only. I'd also have the fan of the power supply pointing towards the front panel, and I'd put some 4mm holes through the front panel at the bottom to feed air to the power supply. That way it won't destroy the natural way that the air wants to flow through the case. So just to be clear, I'd make it approximately 100mm diameter. The fans in the SFX power supply are either 80 or 92mm approximately. So if you have a circle on the front of 100mm with 4mm holes going through it, that would feed that power supply really well. And the last thing is the motherboard screws. I found some of the screws are too long, so when you tighten the screws down, they bottom out and they don't pull the motherboard down properly. This is only the case with some of the screws, not all of the screws, so it might be the case that the standoffs aren't threaded deep enough. But what's happening is the screw's bottoming out before it pulls the motherboard down. Now, I've built with this case a few times and it doesn't always happen. It's only on a few of the cases, so I suspect it's actually the standoff's not tapped deep enough. So again, it's quite annoying because it's very difficult to see sometimes. So if you're building this case, just try and move, when it's tightened down, just try and move the motherboard a little bit, see if the motherboard does move. And if it does move, then you need to put a shorter screw in to make sure you're actually grabbing the motherboard down. Otherwise you can damage the motherboard if you're not careful. Okay guys, many thanks for watching. I'm going to do a video next, more in-depth video with this case, with the proper build that I've done. Many thanks for watching. Bye.